Hey guys, Kalika here. Just wanted to go over some tips and tricks for my students who are going to be doing watercolor with figure drawing. So I have a lot of things here. Just want to kind of go over some of the things that I'll be demoing in this video, or just some things to show you that you may not be aware of. So I'm going to be working on this paper. You can use any kind of watercolor paper. This one is a mixed media paper, so you can see that right here. Sorry for the sound. It's about 117 pounds. My students usually use a 140-pound paper, so that way it doesn't buckle. The stronger or the higher the pounds, the thicker the paper. So I like to use hot press, not necessarily cold press, but I'll just kind of go over some of these watercolors. So this is my dominant set that I'll be using. You may have a different set. And so you'll just be using similar colors. The thing I like about this one, which is more pricey than the Talon's watercolor set that a lot of my students will be using, this one in particular has these little, and again, like I said, this is the Pelican set. This one in particular has these sides that you just take off like this, and then you take it off like that. These lock together to create a water bucket, which is awesome. I love that about it. And so I have one here already ready to go. You can see the water in there. So I'll just leave that there. Okay. And then when you open it up, it's got a tray that it comes with. Okay. And that goes on the other side. And then it's got your watercolors here. And these watercolors can pop out when you run out of them. Typically, they don't always look this clean. The other set of mine is really messy. So this is what we'll be using for the main demo. I also invested in some of these Pearlescent watercolors, which are amazing. I love the way these look. So I'll show you in the video how these come out. But they look like this. They're really pretty. Look at that. Okay. So you can use something like this with your watercolors. So interchangeably. So I'll just leave them out of the packet for my demo. When we went to Ghana, we actually bought this at an art store because I wanted to do some watercolors while I was there. So I don't know if you'll be able to find this particular brand here in the United States, but yeah, this is a watercolor set that you could buy something like this if you're new to watercolor just to practice. It's got a sand paddle pointer to sharpen your pencil, pencil sharpener, a basic watercolor set here, and then some watercolor pencils. And you can take this with you very easily, portable. It's even got a brush in there as well. Okay, so just wanted to show you that. I won't be using it in the demo, but just wanted to show you. One of my good friends also bought me this. I think it's a birthday present, and it's a watercolor paper kind of sketchbook. And so when you open it up, it's got pages in here. You can see the binding, and they're really thick pages. So if you see, well, this is one page, pretty hard, it doesn't bend. Okay. And so you can take this with you and, you know, draw on the go. So I was just, you know, sketching some things out along the way. Yeah, so this is awesome, okay, to have. They also have this koi watercolor set. Again, I won't be demoing this one, but I do use this one in my main watercolors, and I also use it when I travel around. So this just slides out, and you have a watercolor set. Okay, let me just put this one back in. So there's your watercolor set, and this is just some old watercolor that I was doing before. All you have to do is re-wet it because watercolor doesn't technically dry. The sponge will be your paper towel, let's just say, to clean your brush. And this is the brush that it comes with. You can see the water's already in it. I just leave my water there. You can also use an aquash brush to do something similar. So you just take that off, okay, and put the brush tip on, and you have a brush with water already there. So it's a very portable way to do watercolors if you've never tried that before. Another thing that I'll have in my demo that I'll be using is, well, I don't know if I'll be using it in the demo, but I have it here with me. Prismo watercolor pencils are great to have. You can use these to start off a drawing. So you can see them in here. And there's also, if you don't know, Prismacolor and other brands make water-soluble color pencils. Okay, so you can use these with watercolors as well. Whoops, sorry. So those are there. This is the new pack, okay? So we might touch into that. We'll see. I have a extra palette with me just for mixing purposes. Makes it my life a little easier so I don't have to clean areas all the time. I also have a Tough Stuff eraser, which is a Factus BM2. Okay, and I have a mechanical pencil You can use like an F or an HB drawing pencil, but I'll be using that too. And then this one is actually something I took from my husband. And this is a gouache set. So if you're not familiar with gouache, it's peeling off right here. But this was a set from Caran d'Ache, which is really awesome. And I keep my brushes in here. So I just taped that shut like you saw. I keep all my watercolor brushes in here. You can use these brushes with ink, watercolor, but don't use your same brushes with oil or acrylic. So I tend to keep my oil and acrylic brushes separate from my ink and watercolor brushes. These are awesome, feel nice and pretty. So I have those in here. And then underneath I have my gouache if I choose to use it. So I probably won't do too much with this in the demo, but just so you know, sometimes with my drawings, I do mix a little bit of gouache. And then it's nice to have a Chinese white. So I actually will take that one out. Okay. And then we'll close this back up. So have my brushes here, and I'll just kind of keep those brushes off to the side. All right, so let's get started with our watercolor. I also have some paper towels here. I have a whole roll with me. And then I took out a Sanguine Conte pencil, and my gouache was a little hard to open. So if you're painting tubes, whether it's acrylic or oil or watercolor, if they're ever hard to open, just run it under hot water, and then it makes it easier to take that off. And same thing with like jars of jelly or whatever you have at home. So I've got, this just happens to be 2 paper towels. I'm just gonna fold that in half. Always have paper towels with you when you're working with watercolor. I also took out a kneaded eraser, so I have that handy as well. So this is gonna be the actual paper I draw on. This is my tester sheet. You need to have a tester sheet while you're working. That tester sheet typically should be the same paper that you're working with. So these are the same papers, just a separate one. If you're working on the classwork from my class, what you may want to do is cut some of that paper, cut it down to whatever size you want, and don't throw away your scratch paper. Save that for your tester sheet. You can use the front and the back for the testing. Okay, let me show you some of the brushes that I tend to work with. One of my favorite brushes, whether it is watercolor or oil or acrylic or anything, tends to be the filbert brush. So this is a filbert. And think about a filbert, sorry, being like the tip of a finger. Okay, so it kind of has that arch right there. So this is a filbert. I'll just show you which brush that I'm using so you know. Okay, so that's my filbert. I also have another filbert here. Okay, so again, I'll just show you that one. You can see the size. And this one's in a little plastic container like that. I try to keep that on there to maintain the watercolor, so don't throw those away. And if you can't put them back on without splitting the hairs, then don't do it. But I have another filbert here, different size. I also love mop brushes. This is one of my favorites. This one's like my baby. It holds a lot of watercolor. And I'll show you what that one is. Okay. And then this one's almost looks like a filbert, but like a mini mop. This one right here, let me let it focus. Right there, okay. And then here is, so I would say this is more of a round, I think it's like a round mop, but there you go. Probably was really round at one point. Then the other ones I like to use are the brights. Okay, so this is a bright. Okay, and then it's a 1-inch bright, so it's good for washes. Okay, brights are the shorter tip. I don't like flats. This is a flat, okay? I have one, I don't like it. But you can see how the hairs are much longer, so this is a flat, so I don't tend to use those as much. Doesn't mean you can't use it, just saying I don't tend to use it. And then this is a 3/4, love that brand, okay. Another bright right there, okay. And then this is the newest one to the family, okay. So again, the Cotman brushes from Winsor & Newton are awesome. This is a new one, so when they come new, if I can focus, it's nice and pointy. Okay, so that will harden or soften up, sorry, when it's applied to water. So these are the main ones I'm going to use, just so you know what I'm using. And then another one that I like is this one right here, just so you can see the brand. It's a little softer. Okay, so I'll keep that one in there as well. I'm going to start off by using some testers on here just to show you how to mix some colors, because my students are going to be doing life figure drawing and I want to show them how to mix these colors. I'll also walk you through the difference between traditional watercolor and non-traditional. Okay, so one book that has helped me a lot with color in terms of skin tone has been this one. It's painting beautiful skin tones with color and light, and it has oil, pastel, and watercolor in it. And so this one is a great book to get if you're struggling with mixing skin tones or anything like that. I don't want to show the whole book, but I would recommend investing in this book. So let's get started here. First things first, I'm going to grab my paper towel. I'll always have that in my hand, and I'll try to keep it in the picture so you can see. I have some red on top of my yellow, so I'm actually going to use one side of my water container. I'm not going to use the other side until this side gets dirty. So I filled it about 3/4 of the way. You could also do half of the way. I'm going to take some of the water off, then go here, and then I'll just re-wet some of this because I need to clean my palette so that my yellow is not influenced by all that red that was on it before. So I'm just cleaning that and then taking the water off. Okay, so now that I have that clean, I'm going to make a skin tone, like a peach kind of color skin tone, and then we'll see how we can mix some other colors. So first things first, I'll take my red, and there's different kinds of reds. Let me clean the other ones as well. This one is more of a brownish kind of brick red. Okay, I'll just clean these so you guys can see them. Okay, so I've cleaned some of my paints, and I'm going to take my primary red. I use this as my primary red, so let me show you the difference between the two. If I take this one and put it down, you can see that color. Okay, I'm going to clean this off, take some off, paper towel, and then I'll touch this one. You can see how this one's a little bit more pink, especially when it gets into the white and dilutes itself. So you don't want to use the pinkish one because you're going to make someone look like they're really sunburned. Use that one when you're trying to make maybe a Caucasian peachish color skin tone. Okay, so we'll start off by getting a little bit of water. I dominate with red first. Okay, I'll put the red into the hole. So I'm going to get a little bit more water and push that into this reservoir. Okay. Then I'm going to go ahead and start mixing my yellow into it. Don't take too much. You can always add more, but you can't take it out, okay? And if you need to test it, you can test it. I'm just going to try to mix up a color, and then I'll test. Okay, that's too yellow, obviously. Let's take a little bit more red and put it in there. And then let's test that out. I think I need to mix it a little bit more. Let's try that one more time. Okay, not that bad. I'm going to add a little bit more water to it and stir that up, and then we'll test that out. Let's add a little bit more red, and depending on whatever skin tone you're trying to make, usually it's going to be this one, and white, but since our paper's white, we're kind of depending on that. If you feel like it's got a little bit more readiness to it, you can take a little bit of this red and mix it into that mixture. I'm just trying to take that back and put it into this reservoir. And you'll notice I'm making a little bit more of my main color because I'll use this color to make all the rest of them. Okay, so let's test that one out. That's not bad. I kind of like that, okay? So that's going to be my main color. Now, what I like to do is start off lighter. So I'm going to take a lot of this, and I'm just going to kind of split it and put it into another reservoir. The little bit that I have here, I'm just going to take water and add to it because I need a lighter version of what I have. Okay, so there's that. Then I'll stir this up carefully. I feel like a chemist. Okay, and let's see if we have a lighter version. So now we have a lighter version right there. Okay, all right. So now I have this color. So now I've got two different colors right here. I'm going to add, let's see, a little bit more pink to my second one here. And again, it's not necessarily pink, but it's got that kind of ruddiness to it. I'll add a little bit of that just to change the color. Take some off. I'll take a little paper towel and then just try to test that out. Okay, so let's take a little bit more. There we go. Okay, so now I've got two colors. Now, if I need to make some kind of shadow mask, what you're doing is you're taking one and bringing it over here to mix another. Your shadow mask has to have the color of the object in it. So let's say you have a shadow mask of whatever is in this little cup here. Well, this kind of burgundy brown color is influencing the shadow mask. So you can't just ignore your light masses to get your shadow masses. So I take some of that and put it over here. That's why you need to make a lot of the initial one. To get a shadow mask, I will turn it into a darker color by adding some cool colors in it. Now you could use a blue, but if you use too much blue, sometimes the blue with the yellow starts to turn the person green. So let's try purple. I think purple works really nice. So you just kind of brush that over and mix it up. Again, less is more. Test it out. You can see the color changing in the reservoir, which is nice, okay? And then let's test that out. So this is why it's called a tester sheet. So you can see it getting a little darker. That's pretty color, and it's different from what I did before. I'm gonna add a little bit more purple in it so we have a little bit more impact. Go ahead and stir that up. And then we'll test that out. That's pretty, okay? So that's a difference between what I did before, okay? Now I'm gonna take this one and bring it over here. Okay, you don't wanna run out of anything though, so you gotta be careful and know what you mix to remix. That's what is difficult. So you gotta be able to remix something if you need to. So we'll take a little bit more water, put it in here, okay? Now for this one, I'm gonna add some more color to it. So I'm gonna add more purple, which will cool it down because purple is a cool color. But if I make too much purple, then I've turned the person purple, okay? So I'm gonna go back to some red and mix that in there as well because I don't wanna lose my shadow mask. And then this is starting to look too much like this one, so we're gonna go back to purple. Now the reason why I'm doing this because I actually need more paint when I'm getting to the shadow mask. So I'm trying to mix a little bit more paint, okay? I can touch a little bit of yellow, but it doesn't make much of a difference at this point. Now, if I want this to get darker, I'm gonna add some more blue. And you notice that I went into my lighter blue, there's a darker blue here. My darker blue has a little too much green in it. So let me just show you what that looks like, okay? And yours may be the same case even with a different brand. So we have this blue here, which is gonna be my primary blue. And then we have this blue over here, which has a little bit more of a greenish quality to it. So that's why I don't go into that one, okay? Because that'll, again, make your person look like they're sick, all right? Let's test out this color that we made. So it's a lot of color mixing, I would say. I'm gonna put a little bit more red in it. I feel like after I put the water, it's a little too transparent, okay? We're gonna put a little bit more of that initial skin tone. Don't worry about the dirtiness. You can always clean it, okay? And when I say clean it, that's either with a paper towel or you just take a brush with water and just kind of wipe that out. And then you're good to go. It's also color unification. So you kind of want, that's why I said you kind of want all the colors to somehow influence each other. Obviously you don't want them all to mix, but you need some kind of influence. Okay, so we're gonna add a little bit of blue to this one to take that down darker, okay? And it's starting to give a little bit of a brownish impression. Let's try that out. Not bad, okay? I feel like there's a nice segue between this, and this, okay? All right, let's test it out. So the next step, on my paper, I'm going to draw out a couple of spheres to help you understand how this whole process works, okay? So we'll do a sphere here, and we'll keep it fairly light. Hopefully you can see it, okay? And I'll do another one here. It's a little darker. And then I'm going to use my Penguin Conte pencil to do another one here. Don't judge me on my spheres, okay? On this one, we're just going to use the white paper. On this one, we're going to use the graphite. Again, this is a mechanical pencil. And then on this one, we're just gonna keep the Penguin alone, okay? And then I wanna go ahead and test out these watercolors. So I'm gonna use my lightest light. Have your paper towel with you. Okay, so get water. You can see it's dripping, okay? Knock some off. Get some watercolor. Knock some off. Dab your paper towel. Test it. When you're ready, go ahead and paint. You don't want anything that's gonna run. You can see that it's water, but it's not runny water. Okay, I'm able to spread it. I'm not dry painting. And notice that I'm saving my highlight. I'll go back to water, knock it off, no paint, paper towel. And then I'm just going to soften this edge before it dries. So you're just basically irritating the edge to soften it before it dries. So you're saving the white of the paper there, okay? While that's drying, we're gonna practice this one. Now on this one, you saw me shade the graphite in there to represent the shadow mask. And so now I'm going to take my paint, dab it on my paper towel. If you're not too sure, you can test it out to see if it's too watery. If it is, paper towel, go back again, and then paint. Now you'll notice some of this graphite is mixing in with my paint. So on this one, I'm gonna stop it there, okay? Go to water, paper towel, and then we'll spread. Because if you keep spreading too much, some of that gray will influence your light mask too much, okay? So on this one, we're using some of the graphite to help with my shadow mask, okay? Just went into water, paper towel, just to try to fill that area in, okay? And on this one, I'm gonna go ahead and get my paint and do the same thing. Now you'll notice I went a little heavier, meaning a little darker on this one. It was the same paint palette, but I went a little heavier, meaning I didn't knock so much off because I had the cream on the outside, this sanguine on the outside. So I'm giving you the same color palette and how it can be represented 3 different ways, okay? And there's another way to do it that's using the Chinese white, but we'll talk about that later. Now that this is drying, I can go here. Now in this example, I'm not working necessarily wet into wet. You'll notice that this mixture here is the same as this mixture, but if I take it and I put it on top, it's gonna get darker. Just like any color, if you put it on top of something after it dries, it's gonna get darker, okay? So you can take the same color again, or you can take it to the next step. I think on the first one, I'm gonna take the same color again, and I'm just gonna pat it dry. You can test it out for your color or your runniness, and if it feels like it's too runny, you could take some off, but I'm gonna go right into this one. And I'm just going along the edge first, and then I'll pull it towards the center. I don't want to cover everything I already did because then I won't have my transition. So go to water, paper towel, and then soften this edge before it dries. It's like you're going half and half over that edge. And then you want to soften it. So water, paper towel, look for any hard edges and soften it, okay? You're just trying to maintain your highlight in the middle. On this one, because we already have the dark, I'm gonna skip that step that I just did, and I'm gonna go straight into value number 2, okay? Paper towel, and I'm gonna test that out, okay? Then we'll go right into that. So you can see how that's significantly darker than the other one. So this can be a faster method with a different outcome. Okay, and again, I'm going to kind of bring this around the edge, and then I'll stop, water, paper towel, and soften edge. If you lose a highlight, you can always take a paper towel and press right into that and lift that back up. And then on the next one, I'm gonna go ahead and go with my darker one as well. And again, I wouldn't just take this and start painting, because if you just take this and start painting, do you see how much water there is on that? That's too much, okay? Vice versa, if you go like this, and let's say you take paint and you start painting like this, that's dry brushing, okay? So we don't want that. We need a mixture in between. So you're gonna take this, and I'm running out of paint, so I'm gonna go ahead and mix some more before I run out. Okay, so I'm taking my red, and then I'm gonna take the yellow and mix that up. And if you have the swatches here, if you're not sure which one was which, label them. Like say, okay, this was my number 1, and this is my number 2, and this is my number 3, and this is my number 4. That way you know how to match it again, okay, if you're not sure, okay? And I'm just gonna test this out, see where we are. It's a little bit more pink, okay? I kind of like that color though, so I'm not gonna get rid of it. So I'm not going for perfection. I'm gonna use it. I think it's a pretty color. And then we'll just test this out. Okay, so paper towel, I'm gonna go right into that. So you can see how that matches that sanguine very nicely. Okay, so I thought that's really good. Go here, stop, water, paper towel, and spread. Now we have all 3 going, okay? And then we're just gonna get some shadow masses in there so you can see how to work the shadow masses. As I get to the smaller area, I'm gonna switch brushes. So the reason why we have so many brushes is so that you can change out your brushes. and go to smaller brushes. Now I don't really have much of an in-between between the last one and this one. So I'll go ahead and tap into this round and see how that works out for me. Okay, I'm gonna get into my shadow mask over here. Let's move that out of the way, okay. Go here, we'll test that out. Okay, make sure it's not too runny, use a paper towel. And then we can go ahead and isolate a little bit more shadow mask. I feel like this brush is way too small for what I'm working on right now. So I'm actually gonna go back to my other brush. Don't leave your brushes in the water. You'll notice how I'm not leaving them in the water, because if you leave them in the water, the hairs will start falling out, okay? I'm gonna go ahead and go here. Then I'll take that completely off, go to my water, and just kind of soften out that shadow mask. I'm not trying to take it to the light mask, just leave it in the shadow mask, okay? And there is a way to do this wet into wet. So just an example, if you had this and you were painting, that's a little too light, okay? Let's say you're painting something like that, and then you want to go to the next color or make it a little darker and add another color in it. You can do that while it's still wet. It just starts to bleed, okay? You can go into your darker darks and work into that. It just starts to bleed. So if you know how to do watercolor, that's great, but I just want to show you how if you start getting all these colors in here, I'm being very extreme, but you can see what the wet into wet does. If you don't let it dry, see how that bleeds out? It only goes to the edges in which you're working, but that may be ideal for a background or for like clothing or something like that. And if you're able to control it, that's great. But in the foreground, where like the face, that may not be the method that you want. You may want this in clothing or background where you want it to be less sharp. You want it to be a little bit more soft of a transition. So that works really nicely. And if that dries, then you're able to control on top of it. But wet into wet works that way. There's a whole bunch of techniques that you can check out on YouTube in terms of how to handle watercolor, like putting salt in there, using saran wrap, stamping. There's all that stuff you can do. But for the sake of time, we're just going to kind of mix a little bit more of the skin tone, which is what my students are needing to do. Okay. Now that that's drying, we'll go into the next step. So again, I'll just stay with the same brush, and we were using this color here. I'm just going to tap on my paper towel, and you can again test it if you want to. I'm pretty confident with my color. So we'll go here and keep it in the shadow mask. Okay. And I'll take some off without water and just kind of soften that. I think I had enough water on there already. Okay. So that's looking good. And then we'll take the same color, touch it, okay, and then I'll go into my shadow mask here. So that way we have that skin tone that's being darkened by a cool color, so that the person that you're drawing, again, imagine this is a person, so that person doesn't start to look like they're a completely different color, okay? All right, now that that's drying, we'll go into our shadow masks. And I do have another brush here. I don't know how well that's focusing, but I have this brush, so maybe I'll introduce that one into this area. So if it's really fuzzy like this, it gets a little bit more crisp once it's in water, so you have a little bit more control when your brush is wet. Let's get into some darker shadows. So we'll touch this one, okay? And again, if you forgot, you can test it out. It's a big jump. Okay, take some paint off, and then we're gonna go ahead into it. Just have enough control so that it's not going all over the place. Now you'll notice I'm working flat, okay? You can also do watercolor vertically, and I'll show you what happens when you go vertically too. So I took some water, no paint, and just soften this edge. So I'm gonna go water, no paint. See that hard edge? Soften it before it dries. Go again, water, just kind of soften, because you're getting into your light mask over here, so you gotta control it. Try not to overwork something. So if you're frustrated and you start overworking it and you just keep going into it and you're like doing this, I'll show you what happens. So one, you start to strip the layer underneath, which may be what you want. See these little speckles here? That starts to eat the paper up. So that's not what you want. And then that compromises the integrity of your paper, and it's hard to paint over that and get a nice smooth quality, okay? So we don't want to have that happen. We'll go into the shadow masks of these using the same brush, same color. 3 different spheres, 3 different outcomes. I feel like the sanguine also impacts the sphere, so that's why I wanted to give you different ways of starting this. Again, this was the line drawing. This was a line drawing with shading, with graphite. And then this one was just Conte, okay? All right, so moving on to some of our darker darks. So if you want to get this even darker, what I would do is I'd take this mixture. I'm going to go ahead and clean my palette a little bit. So to do that, I'm just going to dip my paper towel in some water and then just clean that out. If it's a puddle and you don't need it anymore, just go to the sink and wipe that out. All right, so I'm going to take my shadow mask and bring it into this area. I could also use that other extra tray that I had, but I'm going to use this other area here. And I'm going to, I'm going to use black, okay? You don't need to use black. You can always make a black, but if you want something darker, be careful how black you go because this will really overpower your drawing. But you'll notice I use this one into my black. So I'm not just purely putting down a black. I have still, everything is unified, okay? Test it out. It's a darker version, so it's not black. So let's just give you an example. Let's take straight up black and put it there. Do you see how harsh that is compared to what I made? So I've used black to darken something up. I'm not just using black alone. So I never use black by itself, whether it's oil, acrylic, watercolor, or pastel. Okay, so we'll take this mixture here. And again, you can test it out if you don't trust yourself. You can use your paper towel to take some off. This is gonna be my core shadow. Again, I don't wanna go too dark. I'm just gonna kind of stay in the middle where a core shadow would be, then take everything off and work very fast because it starts to dry. Irritate that edge. I'm not working on watercolor paper, so mine is drying a lot faster than usual, and I have a ceiling fan on. So if you don't want yours to dry too fast, then, oops, if you saw that water drop, okay, then turn off your fan and use real watercolor paper. Now I gotta kind of fix this because I feel like something bad happened. So let's just fix this up a little bit. And then I'm gonna add a little bit more skin tone in this area because I feel like it's a little too light. Let's go into this one here. And then this one over here. All right, so different outcomes give you different things. I'm going to try a different method. So let's say we want to mix a completely different skin tone, but this just helps you with, let's say, I don't know, Caucasian skin tone, whatever you want to do. This one looks a little bit more olive-like, so if you wanted the person to look a little bit more olive, you could take any of these colors and mix it into what I told you. So let's say I mix a little bit of this one, which is kind of like a yellow ochre, okay? And let's try that out. Okay, that's a little too orange. Now, how would you dull down something that's a little too orange? Well, the complement of orange is blue, so we're gonna try to put a little bit of blue in that, just to neutralize it a little bit, okay? And we'll try that out. This is color theory. Look at that, okay? Nice color right there. Same color, just added a little bit of the complement, which is a blue, and that could be someone who's a little bit more, of like a brownish kind of tan, I don't know, whatever skin tone you would say that is. If you feel like there's a little bit more green in that, I'm gonna take this one, which is kind of like a darker version of a yellow ochre. I'm gonna mix it into the same color. So I'm just showing you how you can take one color and start changing it depending on what skin tone you're replicating. We'll see what that one looks like. Okay, so now we're here. Let's say I want this to look a little bit more greenish, okay? You gotta be careful, okay? Now remember, we have some yellow in there already. What if we took a little bit of the darker blue? Now your tendency would be maybe to use these greens, but I know that if I mix these two greens, and if you don't know, you can try it, okay? So here would be your experiment. If you're not too sure and you have a good color mixture, you take it and you put it somewhere else. That way you don't ruin your mixture, okay? Take it, put it somewhere else, try something else. Try a green. Like you want more green, try a green, okay? It may work just fine, and that may be the color you're looking for. There's a nice brown. You're almost getting to my skin tone there, okay? Without even using brown, okay? So there's that. Or you could take it and try doing a blue. So we're gonna take that mixture, put it over here. And this is what you would need to practice. And once you get the hang of it, you can see where to take it. So we're gonna take some blue and put it in there. It's probably gonna give you a totally different outcome. This could be dipping into my skin tone as well, but more of a greenish olivey color, which is what I had mentioned to you, okay? So if you want an olive, it's actually better to use the blue that has the green in it than to use the green by itself, okay? What do you know? All right, so let's say we're mixing Kalika's skin tone, okay? And I have all these colors. You can do exactly what I just did, which was you could use this one, you could use this one, you could use this one, you could use that one, whatever. I mean, take notes on what I'm doing, but you could also just say, let's take, I'm gonna wipe out some of this so I have some reservoirs to use. I'm gonna just suck that up, and you can do this, either wash it down the sink or just soak it up with a paper towel, okay? When you are done with your session, you could actually let this paint dry, and then you can just re-wet it. So if you mix a color that you like, you can let it dry in your reservoir or in your area, and then re-wet it and keep using it. So I have another palette like this that I'm using for another watercolor, which is why I'm not using it on this demo, but that's just a heads up if you have a nice mixture that you've made, okay? All right, so let's say we're trying to mix my skin tone. I'm just gonna turn this upside down so we have a clean sheet of paper, okay? Now we've already gotten some browns over here, but let's try something different. I'll get a new paper towel, and I'm going to use the other side of my water, okay? So I'm gonna get my water, and let's see, let's use this one, okay? So I'll start off with this one, which is a little bit more brick brown. If you're, again, not too sure on what that color looks like, it's a little more ruddy, okay? So I won't use too much of it. I know it's too intense. Complement of red is green, but this is not necessarily a red, it's more of a brownish red. So we could try this color here, which has a lot more green in it too. It's mixing the two together, okay? Color Theory 101. Okay, and then test it, because again, you may not know what this looks like until you test it out. I just add some water in there and then test it out. So I'm getting different variations. And if you start, like, let's say you like that color, then you save it here, you mix another one, because it's just like in oil painting. You never know what color may work for you and how one color can, you just tweak it a little bit by adding something to it, okay? So I have my skin tone here. I'm gonna go ahead and put a little bit more of this one into it. And then I like that blue, so I'm gonna change and add a little bit of that dark blue, not the primary one, the dark one that has the green in it, okay? And just stir it up and test that out. Oh, that's nice. Oh yeah. See how pretty that is? Okay. Now, whenever you have like African-American skin tone like mine, purple works beautifully in the shadow masses. Okay, so let's say you're doing something similar. Let me take that paint off, and I'll just give you like a sphere over here. I don't know why this is so big. Oh well. Okay, I'm gonna change my brushes because I drew a bigger sphere. So we'll go back to this brush. Just clean your brush, you lay it flat, and then you clean it with soap and water later on. All right, so I'm gonna take this one as my primary mixture, and I'm gonna mix some other things before I do my sphere because I know things dry pretty quickly. So I'll take some of that, put it down here, okay? And I like purple, so I'm gonna mix some purple into it right away, okay? Now the purple's not gonna do too much. It'll give me a different color for sure. You don't want it to go, you know, to a point where my skin now looks purple. So see how that looks a little too purple? How would you go back to a brown when you have something that's a little too purple? Well, if you need to neutralize a red, you could add a yellow, okay? And now if I add this yellow, that may be too extreme. because I'm still going for my skin tone. So we know that this one looks like it has yellow in it because I said it's a darker version of a yellow ochre. So wouldn't it be smart to put this one into that one to help you get more of a skin tone? Let's try it out. So we're gonna take this one and put it in here. Now I feel like I grabbed a lot, so I'm just gonna take some off. You put it in there. Now if you feel like you grabbed a lot, just clean your brush and then keep mixing. All right, let's try that out. Oh, look at that. Perfect, okay? That's a pretty color. I don't think it's getting me dark, but that's a pretty color. So I'm actually gonna save that color, and I like the amount that I made. I'm gonna make a new color over here. So here we go. All right, that's a pretty color. I actually like that better than that one. So what I tend to do, and this one's a lot more dark, like more pigment in it, more paint. Take it, put it here, mix it. Take that, put it there, mix it, and just keep going back and forth. Add water to both, and now you have more paint. Stir it. Stir it, and then test it out. Nice color, right? Now we have a lot of both. Now I can take this one, which is the same color now, and I can make this one darker. So in order to make this one darker, we're gonna go into that darker blue. And let's see what that looks like. Oh, there we go. Look at that. Okay. All right, now I feel like I need a little bit more of a lighter brown. I kind of had it before, but I probably lost that. So I'm gonna take some of this one, bring it over here, and I'm gonna make a new color out of it using a little bit more of the yellow ochre. So again, different color palette, same idea as what we did before. And then let's test that out. Not too bad. Okay, that could be like the light areas of my skin. All right, so here we go. We're gonna kind of do the same method, and so I'm just gonna kind of speed this up so you can see what we did. Okay, so one way to check this, you can see me using the back of my hand. You can feel temperature a little bit better on the back of your hand than your palm. So that's why when people take their temperature, you know, they kind of use the back of the hand. So use the back of the hand, and if it feels like it's cold, then it's still wet. But if it doesn't, and it feels like the rest of the paper, then you're good to go. So I'm going to take my brush and go into this color, because remember I had mixed this one first. So, well, this is supposed to be first, but you know what I mean. So I'll go ahead and go into this one. You can test out, don't test on the same paper you're drawing. This is just all examples. So you would have a separate tester sheet like I did the first time, and go ahead and paint. Now you don't want to dry brush, so you can see how it's not really spreading. I added a little bit more water to that just to let it spread a little bit more. Otherwise, I'll have too many hard edges, and again, that's not what we're looking for. Stop ahead of time, go to your water, paper towel, soften the edge to the best of your ability so that you have still a light mask. Now, anything like this that happens, this kind of separating, I try not to go over that and irritate it because it can fix it in the next step. So we're gonna let that dry. Now that this is drying, we'll go into the next layer. So we'll go into this color, again, test it out, paper towel, and then we'll go right over both of these. Get a little bit of water. And start spreading that out before it dries. Go back into my paint. And again, if we're working vertically, it will fall on you. Not fall on you, I don't mean it like that, but it'll spread a little bit. And sometimes I like working vertically better. So try it out. when a flat surface like this, it all just kind of sits there. So it's nice to have a little bit of an incline. You could even work on an easel if you want to. We'll let that dry. While that's drying, we'll just put this off to the side. I wanted to show you a couple things with the other drawing we had over here. I'm going to clean my brush. Now, if I wanted to change some of this, let's say the person that I'm working on had pink cheeks or whatever it is, or certain areas a little ruddy, I can take this red right here and you want to put it in your palette and then make sure you have the right consistency. And I'm just testing it off to the side. I can also test it on here, that way you guys can see it, but just a little bit of pigment. You don't even need the skin tone. We're gonna do kind of like a glaze on top. I'm just gonna test this on a tester sheet of paper. Make sure it's not too runny. I just touch the paper towel. And then I can put that in certain areas. So if that person had a little bit more of a pinker cheek, I could put a little bit of pink here, just to show you, okay? And then you take your paper towel and just kind of soften that edge if you wanted to get some pink into it, okay? Let's say you wanted to get a little influence of a, I don't know, turquoise, okay? I'm gonna show you where you can use this gouache even on this sphere. So we'll take some of this gouache, which is Chinese white, and we'll put a little bit onto this area right here. Now it's almost like whiteout when it's liquefied. When it is solid, it tends to dilute, and so it's better when it's actually wet. So I try not to use too much in one stage. I'll put more if I need it. I'm gonna make like a turquoise color. So I'm gonna use this blue and put it over here because I don't want to lose the colors I mixed. And again, make sure you're mindful of your runniness, meaning it's not melting into all the other colors, okay? You can also use paper plates if you wanted to. I'm gonna use a little bit of this green. And when I say you can use paper plates, that means you could actually mix on a smooth paper plate as well. And then we'll take some of the white. So we'll go into this water and just pick up some of this white. And this is non-traditional as soon as you go into Chinese white. See how that lightened up? So now it's like a baby blue, okay? If I wanted some of this on here, now as soon as I put Chinese white into something, it turns that color more opaque. And if I put more into it, let's say I take this here and I put more Chinese white and I mix like a lot of it, gouache is opaque watercolor. I didn't clarify that before. Do you see how that just covers that? Okay, so it's opaque watercolor. So you gotta be careful if you're working traditional and then you wanna add some Chinese white into it, you could end up with something like that, which is not what you want. So we wanna be very delicate. We wanna take that mixture and make sure there's enough water in it so that it's not 100% opaque. And then we're treating it a little bit more like watercolor, okay? And you can test that out ahead of time and then see what it looks like. If you have a little bit of, I think that's too watered down, sorry. If you have a little bit of maybe a bounce back light, I'm gonna take some of this one that's a little bit more opaque. You have a bounce back light over here and you want a little bit of blue, okay? Then go into your water and then we'll just clean off this edge right here where I went over, okay? I'm going to soften this edge before it dries. Let's get a little water, go here. And we'll just kind of soften this edge. So I'm just kind of tinting that edge of the sphere a little blue, and I used a little bit of Chinese white to get that down, but then I treated it like it was watercolor. Okay, so just ways to kind of change things. You could add some greens if you wanted to, so you could take a little bit of green. I'm gonna use that here. Nothing crazy, and you can kind of tint the shadow mask a green if you want. It maintains the value underneath, but just gives you a little tint. So I'm just showing you how to alter some of these colors if you needed it to. You could even add some browns if you feel like you needed some browns in there. So let's say down at the bottom, you want to get, we could even use the brown we have over here, okay? You want to get a little bit more brown in there. So I'm going to take that out and then I'll just kind of spread that around. Sometimes it looks really intense when you put it down, and then as it dries, it starts to lighten up, okay? Same thing here. If I wanted to put a little bit more of a, I don't know, this blue, reflected light on the bottom. Could do a little bit of that, okay? Put that at the edge. And then I could take water and then just kind of soften that if I want to. Be careful how many times you go over it, because then I'm starting to lift that side too. All right, so now that that is working, and you can see how that kind of dried out and how that looks, I'll go right into this one. All right, so let's get into another step on this. And I think I rushed this and I don't have the paper to get it transitioning so you can see some of my edges. I'm gonna take some of this brown and go into my darker darks. So look at that, all that paint that's there, okay? I'm gonna give you an example. If I raise this up a little bit and I start to paint at an angle and I don't have enough control over my paint, you can see how that starts to run. Now I use that to my advantage on a background. So if I had a background that I wanted to get runny, I actually want it to be vertical, I'll do this at a vertical, and obviously don't use a small brush, use a big brush, and let it fall down on purpose. So you could do that in your background just to create some ambiance. Use a bigger brush, but let that water just fall down, and that's the goal of that one. Let's see what we can do with that. I know I just butchered it, but let's see what we can do with it. Okay, so now let's go into another brush so you can see how this wash works. Okay, so I have this mop brush right here, and I just want to show you the power of this mop brush. If you get your mop brush wet, okay, and then you want to do a wash in the background. Now, I don't care what color I'm using, I'm just soaking up color, okay? You mix the color that you want and then soak it up. And what the mop brush does, you can see how my paper is elevated. You go from one side of your paper to the other, and it needs to be controlled enough to not melt and fall down on you, okay? And the whole goal is every time you do another layer, that paint just falls to the next one, the next line, okay? And again, I'm not using watercolor paper, but if I were, you wouldn't see these lines in between, okay? So I'm just gonna kind of go back up and soften that and then just let it fall back down, okay? Again, I'm just going to take that paint and just go here, and I'm going to let it fall. Okay, you have to do this at an incline, otherwise it won't fall. Now, if you wanted to change colors, you can change colors as you're going down. Don't go back up and work that area, let it keep falling down. And then you would not work on this again until your paper was completely dry. Remember we spoke about those pearlescent watercolors? I just wanted to show you how those work on your paper and how you could add them to your watercolors if you wanted to. I'm just going to use a brush and kind of apply some of these on here. Not all of them, it's just I want to show you how it works. Okay, so I think this is a nice one. I'm just going to wet that. Okay, and they give you a palette right here, which is kind of nice. And they're very translucent. I put a lot down, less water. Okay. They're very translucent, and sometimes what it looks like is not what it comes down on the paper. So that's more of like a charcoal kind of color. The gold is one of my favorites. So we'll just kind of, let me put this down. Just kind of wet that and just put that down. I don't know how well you can see this on camera, but I'll angle the paper so you can see it also. And then you can, what's even more fun is because they're so transparent, you could use them on your actual painting. I'm just going to put a little bit more. So I'll take a smaller brush and I'm going to use some of this pearlescent watercolor in my painting that I did before and just kind of touch on some areas. And you still want to fade out because it's very strong. Maybe not from the camera angle, but you'll see it when I lift this up. And then I can also use this white one here, which is almost like looks see-through. I mean, see-through, transparent. Okay, barely noticeable there, but when I put it in to this area here, you'll see a difference in a minute. Okay, so do you see that on there? See how when I tilt it, so you can see the gold. Look at that. This one doesn't have much to it. But see how that changed my sphere? And it just depends on the angle. We'll put some in this one too. That copper. So you can see how that pearlescent can go right on top, transparent, you know, on top of your watercolor, and add this kind of pearly effect to it. So I mentioned some techniques to you, and you can see here, this is one watercolor that I'm working on, that I added some colored pencil right on top of that watercolor. So you can see how the wrap does not have any colored pencil yet, okay? But certain areas of the face do, and that works nicely. I like the texture that it creates on top of the watercolor. I wasn't going for a smooth effect. So this part down here has no colored pencil, and then you can see how I started the drawing as a line drawing, and then moving down to the hands, I used a little bit of graphite for my shading. There's no colored pencil in there yet. Same thing, graphite, no colored pencil. And then I'll be using some of that gold pearlescent color in her outfit. So I just wanted to show you one watercolor that I'm working on. So hopefully this helped you guys. And feel free to go back and watch my other watercolor video that was not filmed as well as this one, but hopefully a combination of the two help you out. Bye.